Hey everyone, here are 10 tips to make you a better player at DC Dual Force. Tip number 1, where does your enemy place their very first unit? Do they place their unit in front of one of their leaders? Or do they place the unit in front of the open space in the middle? The way the human heart works is that you want to protect things that are vital to you, whether you do that subconsciously or not. Your opponent places a Themyscira Minotaur in front of their Wonder Woman. That means that they believe that Wonder Woman is going to be vital to their game plan and probably what they need in order to win the game. Now, whether they know this or not, that actually does not matter. What that tells you is, hey, whether this is a deck that you know or even a deck you've never seen before, that leader probably is the one that you should target first, because they're trying to protect that one the most. So by defeating it might actually be best for you in order to win that game. Which goes into tip number 2. Which leader does your opponent attack first? So on your side of the board, does that Wonder Woman attack your Aquaman or does it attack your Batman first? Depending on which one that they attack may also mean who they believe would be the first one that needs to die in order for them to win the game. That could actually be a clue to you, be like, hey, they keep targeting my Batman more than anything else. So because they keep targeting my Batman, maybe I need to put a little bit more defenses on it. I need not attack using a Batman's ability charges on their units because maybe I need to keep Batman's health points as high as possible, because you never know what your opponent has in hand. Tip number 3, not all the time do you need to use leader abilities at the time that they're actually up. Is it as wise as you think it is to actually hit that button? So a lot of times when you have your leader abilities up and you're like, hey, I'm just going to smack their face and move on, it might be better to hold on to that leader ability and use it to trade maybe into like an Ivy Vine. That way you can control the board and just wait to use the ability. Tip number 4, the history scroll on the left-hand side, actually use that. It will actually give you more information than you think. Did you know that it will tell you, especially if they're aggro, it will actually tell you what they discard? They felt it was more important to discard so-and-so card than to actually play that said card. So by looking at that, you actually are giving yourself more information about what they may have in hand and what their game plan may be in a said game. So definitely use that scroll wheel, because it will actually give you so much more information. All that information is just there for you. Free information. Use it. That way it can get you more wins for the future. Tip number 5, it may actually be important to hold on to your actions as well. Now, different leaders, for example, Batman, Zatanna, Green Arrow, you're going to add different actions to your hand. Now, granted, this is not necessarily just for them, because you also can get actions from your deck as well. But I'm specifically pointing these out because they can create actions. And just because an action is created does not mean that you have to use it the moment you get it. A lot of times it's best to hold on to those actions and you might have a better situation come out in the future. Sometimes you get a free blessing from one of Zatanna's magical spells. Just because you grabbed it that moment does not mean that you need to use it. It might be better to actually wait for one of your combo cards, i.e. Constantine, that you may not have right now in your hand, but you never know what you're going to top deck. So just because you have that and you picked it doesn't mean you have to use it right that moment. So definitely think about that whenever you have leaders with actions, create actions, or even you get actions in your hand from a top deck. Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it right then. You can get away with taking a little bit of damage on your leaders' faces, especially in the early game. Use those actions in the future to control the board when the game is a lot longer and move on to that victory. Now, with tip number 6, the reverse is also true. Did your opponent use an action as soon as they got it? A lot of times, whenever I'm playing this game, I will read my opponent. Whenever I'm playing against someone with Zatanna, got a whole bunch of magical spells. If they are hoarding those magical spells and not using them, that tells me, hey, they probably have a Constantine in hand or something that will combo with it that they're waiting for that magical turn. Or is the reverse true? Are they getting all these magical spells and as soon as they got them, they're just throwing magical spells out like crazy? That tells me, hey, they don't have Constantine in hand. They don't have any combo pieces at this moment in time. So they're just using their magical spells as resources to maybe control the board or maybe attack with, whatever the case may be. These are things that I think about whenever I'm playing against certain leaders or certain enemies. Are they utilizing their actions at maybe a premature moment? Or are they holding it for a big combo moment? Definitely watch out for things like that, as I do. Tip number 7, stick to a plan. A lot of times whenever you're playing a deck, try to stick with your plan of attack, because even if it costs you just a little bit of health for your leaders, sometimes that combo is more important and actually will do more damage. Because a lot of times, what I find with my opponents is they kind of get a little scared. It's like, my leader's health is a little bit low. Maybe I need to use this combo piece earlier than I want to. That doesn't really win you the game. That may win you the moment and this round or this turn, but will that really win you the entire game? Sometimes you gotta use your health as a resource and take those early game hits, just so that way you can come back and have an explosive turn and win in the long game. And of course, demoralize your opponent into probably conceding a little bit earlier than they probably should. Now, tip number 8. This one is going to be a very hard one for a lot of people. Don't tilt. A lot of times, anything can happen in this game. And of course, in card games in general, there's always going to be an RNG element to it. That's okay. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit less. And sometimes you're going to have those days where you win like crazy, and sometimes no matter what you do, you're going to lose. It's a given fact of card games. RNG is going to giveth, and RNG can taketh away. Don't let it bother you too much when you see that 5th deck that you've seen over and over again. Maybe you've seen Flash Doomsday all day long and you're tired of seeing Flash Doomsday. Instead of tilting, getting mad over it, like, oh my lord, this is the 7th time I've seen this deck in a row. If you've seen it that many times, hey, why don't you tech against it? Why don't you change to a deck that instantly kills it? i.e. maybe mono red, which does a very good job against Flash Doomsday. Maybe the deck that you wanted to use isn't the best deck at this moment in time. Maybe this day, for whatever reason, everyone has decided to change the way they're doing things. So maybe you should change a little bit as well. So don't tilt, don't let it get to your head, or at least try not to, because we all have our moments. Now, you might have heard this before, you might have heard a variation of it. 20% of the time, there are going to be games where you win no matter what you do. RNG is on your side, you can misplay like crazy, but you still win no matter what. There's also 20% of that time where no matter what you do, you end up losing that game. You don't get that card that would win you the game, even though you tried to draw so many of the cards and it's just not in your favor. But then there's always that 60%. And this is where the true skill of any card game comes into play. This is why you are playing the game. This is why you're learning. This is why you're listening to these tips. Because the fact of the matter is, 60% of the time, it's going to be a variable. It can go either way. Now, depending on your skill, you might be able to change and waver that a little bit higher towards your favor. So remember this rule whenever you're playing a game, that don't feel bad about it if you just end up losing. Because sometimes, no matter what happens, no matter how hard you try, you're just not going to get what you need or get what you want. It's okay. Just hit the button, go next game, move right along. Now, tip number 9. These last 2 tips are basically more informative tips and things that you as a regular player, especially someone that's new, might want to check into. Know the meta. Seek out, research, look at different streamers. I mean, you can check out my stream at twitch.tv/AnnalyzaGaming. If you don't check me out, there's a lot of other content creators that may have different decks, different ideas, different things you can learn from that can help out your gameplay, that no matter what, there are always different ideas out there, and bounce ideas off. You're more than welcome to come into my streams and show off what deck you're kind of playing with, and maybe I can kind of help you out and fine tune it to make it a little bit better for you. Whether you know it or not, there are going to be decks that people are going to use more often, more consistently. And sometimes with those said decks, there might be counter decks. Now, if you don't go and research, look things up, try to watch information, you might be banging your head against the wall and in turn, going back to before, tilting yourself off this axis of this earth. The key is there's information out there. Seek it out. Don't just sit there and bang your head against the wall. It's going to get bloody. It's going to hurt. So let's try to work together and help each other out. Which leads me to tip number 10, the final tip that definitely will help you out regardless. Check out different decks that are currently on different websites or different decks that other streamers or content creators are using. One big resource you may find is, I would suggest DCForceHQ.com. At this website, there's a lot of different decks out here, and there's a lot of different decks that might have happened in the past in different metas or deck ideas for the future. One good thing I will say is that you can now search by a creator. If there's a certain creator, you know, maybe myself, maybe others, now there's a search function that will help out. So you can sort by certain creators or other people as well. Now, hopefully these 10 tips actually help you out in becoming a better player. Now, honestly, even if one of these tips helped you, hey, my job is done. We all want to help each other become better players. Definitely take these tips, work it out, process them, and I promise you, you'll become a better player, no matter what rank you're in. Whether you're in Sidekick, just starting out, or if you're in World's Finest, you can always become a better player. You guys take care, be safe, and Lord willing, I will see you next time. All that for now.
This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.